From inside the visiting radio booth at M&T Bank Stadium, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. After the Ravens fall to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the second time this year by the exact same score, 17-10, we are going to run through our recap of the game. We'll talk about the impotent defense that was missing a lot of players as well. We'll do our bird's eye view. We'll have Jonas's word of the day. Then we'll talk about the addition of Dalvin Cook and the extension of Michael Pierce. A lot to talk about, but first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
If you have an appetite for saving money, then you should get the Rofo Rewards app from Royal Farms. Use the Rofo Rewards app to place mobile orders for pickup or delivery and earn royalty points to redeem for free stuff. And right now, new Rofo Rewards members will get a free any size coffee for signing up. You can download the Rofo Rewards app at the Apple App Store or Google Play today. You'll find it's a very appealing app to have. Real fresh, real fast. Royal Farms.
All right, Jonas, I thought of several words that could apply to this game. I thought of squelching. I thought of ghastly. Moist, beastly, I think fits as well. Yucky, nihilistic, bereft. But what's your word of the day?
A game can be nihilistic?
It made me feel nihilistic.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, inconsequential. This is what this game is because the Ravens got out of here with a loss that didn't matter. If they'd won, it wouldn't have really mattered, aside from just giving us something to talk about with this winning streak. But no one got hurt. No one got seriously hurt, we should say.
Yeah.
Dafe Owe leaves with an ankle injury that didn't look too bad. He looked fine afterwards. Geno Stone leaving with a knee injury that, again, he seemed to be fine. Post-game, walking around in that locker room, Delshon Phillips, shoulder injury. Again, John Harbaugh said basically all three of those guys he would expect to have in 2 weeks' time. You know, one hidden benefit, one silver lining of this game being played on Saturday. So you have one more game, one more day to, fill out toward the back end as you hopefully get healthy for whenever that divisional round game comes. So obviously, we'll know more tomorrow, or the Ravens will know more tomorrow. We won't talk until Wednesday with John Harbaugh, but still, this game, the Ravens, by virtue of their win over the Dolphins, made this game relatively moot. I'm sure the Steelers appreciated that because they are one step closer to the playoffs. The Ravens might ultimately come to appreciate it because by losing this one, they put the Bills, who are quietly, maybe their biggest threat in the AFC, one step closer to missing the playoffs altogether. So, it's kind of a shrug your shoulders game. It's like you said, it's the it's the meme that doesn't really matter. So again, it's meaningful in Pittsburgh. In Baltimore, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it always feels good to beat the Steelers, and it stinks to lose the season series to the Steelers in 2 games by the same score. However, there was really nothing to be learned about this team from this game because this was not going to be the team. This is not going to be the group of players that the Ravens are going to have on the field in 2 weeks for the divisional round. This is not going to be the game plan that Todd Monken or Mike McDonald is going to scheme up if the Ravens end up meeting the Steelers in the playoffs, or really anybody. And you mentioned people coming out of this game healthy for the most part. And the most important part is that Lamar Jackson is coming out of this game healthy because he didn't play a single snap.
As long as he didn't catch a cold in that weather.
Yeah, I mean, brutal. I was shocked that he was even under that hood. That could have been anybody running out of the tunnel because he was absolutely bundled up. Look, he's a Florida guy. He's not used to this weather. And boy, was it brutal. I give a lot of credit to all the fans who pre-gamed, who tailgated this game, and then sat through this weather in their $5 ponchos to get through this because it was just ugly weather-wise. And the product on the field was, I would say, equally ugly. And I think it says a lot about the Steelers team that for most of this game, they struggled to put away a Ravens team that was starting Tyler Huntley, that was without Zay Flowers and OBJ, that was without Roquan Smith, that was without a lot of their playmakers on both sides of the ball. And yes, they ultimately put the Ravens away, but it took them quite a while. And the game plan for the Steelers appeared to be in this game dink and dunk. Mason Rudolph completed 90% of his passes, but for only about 150 yards in this game. And the Ravens offense, without those key playmakers, was not a whole lot more potent as well in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at how this game played out. Air yard wise, Mason Rudolph, as you mentioned, Paul, 9 for 9 on throws behind the line of scrimmage, which, take what's given to you, I guess.
Yeah.
8 for 8 on passes from 0 to 9 yards downfield. And then he attempted a whopping 3 passes of at least 10 air yards. And Tyler Huntley was not altogether that much more aggressive. He was 3 for 7 on passes of at least 10 air yards. He didn't attempt a single deep pass today, which made sense because that offensive line was not exactly in ship shape with the Ravens rotating a bunch of guys. Uh, Ronnie Stanley played less than 50% of the snaps. A lot of snaps for Ben Cleveland again, obviously with Kevin Seitler's sideline in this one. So it was not a great advertisement for offensive football, unlike the past 2 Ravens games.
Yeah.
A shame this game had to be on an island game for the entire country to see because it was altogether not all that thrilling. But that's what you got to do. Those are that's the price you pay or the benefit you get when you win as many games as the Ravens have. And obviously the Ravens would much rather be 14-3 than 13-4, but they're going to not go to sleep crying about this game. It's just something you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's going to be a footnote in their season, regardless of what happens. I mean, I think back to the 2019 season, and they also had, back then it was a week 17 game that didn't matter, and they got the win with RG3 under center, but it didn't matter. The couple of weeks later, they ended up losing to the Titans. Yeah, and in this game, I mean, it was really just a slop fest on both sides of the ball. What, 8 combined fumbles for these two teams? The only real thing I think you can take from this game offensively for the Ravens, because if Lamar Jackson is healthy, you're not going to see Tyler Huntley. Could have been playing in his final game as a Baltimore Raven, by the way, as he's an impending free agent. So you probably won't see Tyler Huntley in the playoffs. You're going to see better weapons at wide receiver than Laquan Treadwell, and good for veteran Nelson Aguilar to step up with his 5 catches in this game. But and Isaiah Likely with a touchdown as well, continuing to show he's a good, solid backup to the injured Mark Andrews. But aside from that, I mean, Melvin Gordon getting 7 carries of this game and getting 18 yards on the ground was disheartening. Now, I know Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are going to be starting ahead of Melvin Gordon, and we're going to talk later about Dalvin Cook and maybe what he changes to the Ravens game plans going forward. I know this is low on the Ravens list of concerns when you look in the playoffs. But boy, you just hope that the running backs stay healthy, because you never want to get to the point where you are relying upon Melvin Gordon in any kind of meaningful way in a playoff game.
And I think more than that, you worry about the fumbling issues that have cropped up for that position specifically. It was a relatively meaningless fumble for Gus Edwards last week in that game against Miami. That game was pretty much well in hand. I think by the time he fumbled it, and if my memory's shaky, then I think the very next play, Tua throws an interception to Geno Stone. So it was a wash. It came out in the wash altogether. But Melvin Gordon, the most fumbles in the NFL since 2016, 2017, 2019, whatever that stat was that came out. You're probably not going to have to rely on Melvin Gordon come playoff time. That's as simple as it gets. But you are going to have to rely on Gus Edwards. You are going to have to rely on Justice Hill, who dropped crucially a pass, on that first drive.
Yeah.
For as much as Tyler Huntley did not impress today, he didn't have a whole lot of help. There were some drops by pretty much every position group. Laquan Treadwell dropped a pass. Charlie Kohler dropped a pass in that first quarter. Justice Hill dropped a pass.
Hill caught just 3 of his 10 targets in this game.
Yeah, that's not great. But again, meaningless. I should say, not ultimately meaningless for Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah,
making a nice little cash there with a sack.
Yeah, reportedly gets a $750,000 bonus by reaching double-digit sacks on the year. He needed just a half sack in this game, and he got a strip sack of Mason Rudolph in the first half. Was doing some celebrations. I couldn't tell if that was a check signing celebration or if he was making fun of the terrible towel waving.
We need closed captioning for celebrations at this point. A lot of, not just for us, but also for Lamar, because when that Chargers game when Zay was doing his thing, he just had no clue what the heck was going on.
And Todd Monken, because he has talked about how he thinks it's absurd that the offense has a different touchdown celebration each time, and he's never privy to the information and the practice that goes into that. But Jonas, bird's eye view look at this game. anything that you can draw from this performance, either by the offense or by the defense, given the number of players that were missing, given the low stakes of this game for the offense, given the honestly the field conditions as well, and given a poor level of opponent, is there anything you draw from this game that will influence how you view this team as they head into the divisional round in 2 weeks?
No, not really.
Not a single thing.
Nothing in the big picture. I mean,
Yeah.
I think credit to Brandon Stevens for playing every single defensive snap. I did, when we projected who might sit in this game, he was one of the first guys you thought would just get the easy way out and not have to suit up for this one. But I think he played literally every single defensive snap, and he did a great job because George Pickens, was quiet. I don't think he had a single catch in this one. Deontay Johnson was quiet until he was loud and put that game away. But
Yeah.
obviously that was
Pickens had looks like he had one rush for 3 yards and he had 0 catches.
Yeah.
0 targets.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson, I guess, he had a pretty nice game, but it was not at Brandon Stevens' expense. Rock Ya-Sin also having a solid game until that 70-plus yard catch and run
Yeah.
touchdown. So, big picture, this run defense is what it is. This pass protection group is what it is. I don't know how much stock you want to put into this game because of the conditions, because of the familiarity that the Ravens have with Pittsburgh. We don't know, what it's going to look like, whoever they're playing or whenever they're playing next, because we don't know who they're playing next.
Yeah. And we won't know for a while.
And we won't know for at least, for about a week's time. So, like we said, the Ravens did what they had to, aside from taking that loss. I don't know what else there is to say besides the fact that they didn't need to win and they didn't. So
Yeah.
whatever.
I think there was some concern, at least on the social media side of things, for that 71-yard touchdown. Less so about Rock Ya-Sin and more so about safety Marcus Williams, because he was converging on that play and looked like he was slow to get there.
Yeah, look, I tweeted that he was late to break on that one, but to his credit, to my detriment, it looked like he broke on that first, route that was crossing his face, not necessarily the one that he got beat. Not really still a great game for him. There was that, catch and run in the first quarter by Jalen Warren where it looks like he's heading to the sideline. Marcus Williams is trying to escort him there. He cuts against the grain, and another missed tackle from Marcus Williams. That's just a fact of life for the Ravens right now. He's not the guy that he would be if that pec were completely healthy. But, I think it's a good sign that Mason Rudolph did not have to attempt a lot of deep passes, and the absence of those deep targets. If you want to be, complimentary to Marcus Williams and to the safety group, you can say that that's a reflection of him being in the right spot at the right time and just discouraging those types of throws, obviously, until that Deontay Johnson pass actually came over the middle.
Yeah, and that's also why you hope that Geno Stone is going to be fine after he left this game with that knee injury. Obviously, a secondary that was already missing Kyle Hamilton with a knee injury of his own. But the hope is in a couple weeks that he is going to be good to go. All right, Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer here on the Banner Ravens podcast. Thank you for everybody who is tuning in live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Please give us a thumbs up and a like. Jonas, I'm seeing some compliments for your beard, so that's terrific stuff. But Jonas, looking now back through the past week and the transactions that we saw go down, let's talk about the addition of Dalvin Cook, who, pun intended, could perhaps be cooked. The Ravens add him to their practice squad. He is a player that brings a lot of name recognition just because of the phenomenal numbers he put up. I think 4 straight years with at least 1,000 rushing yards in Minnesota.
Yep.
He gets cut in part to avoid paying him a significant amount of money over the summer. He signs with the Jets. And what a disastrous season for that entire franchise and Dalvin Cook in particular. He doesn't have a single touchdown on the season. Receiving wise or rushing wise. What do you think, if anything, he has to provide to this Ravens team? Because do you think that maybe his horrific season could have been the product of the Jets just being all out of sorts, having a terrible offensive line, having a terrible offensive game plan, being without their starting quarterback for the majority of the season? Or do you just think there's very little left in the tank here for Dalvin Cook?
I think there's a little bit left in the tank. You see some reaction to this signing being optimistic about how, oh, he's going to be fresh because of how few touches he got for the Jets. I mean, he was close to a healthy scratch in a game just a couple weeks ago. I think he was active, but just didn't get a single carry, which was a first for him in his career. A report from Jeremy Fowler that the Ravens really like what he could bring to the Ravens as a pass catcher. But again, are you going to put him into a game over Justice Hill
Yeah.
in a high leverage spot on third and long, on third and medium? I don't really know. So I guess if you want to say that there's anything that he brings, it's maybe a safer pair of hands than Melvin Gordon, because it's hard to be as fumble prone as Melvin Gordon if we're going to be honest about where things stand right now. But just in terms of him delivering something to this running game, I personally am not super optimistic. You look at just kind of what has he been able to take advantage of the opportunities that he's been given. Increasingly the answer is no. You look at some of the next gen stats data. Again, this is going back to 2019. Rushing yards over expectation is one of my favorite metrics of are you taking advantage of light boxes, are you making the most of heavy boxes, are you bursting through holes, getting making guys miss, taking a 0 yard gain into a 2 yard gain? Are you taking a 5 yard gain into a 7 yard gain? And increasingly for Dalvin Cook, unfortunately for him, the answer has been no. You look back over these past couple of years. In 2019, he had uh, 0.4 rushing yards over expectation per carry. 2020, 0.6. 2021, 0.2. 2022, negative 0.1. And then this year just really falls off a cliff to minus 1.2 rushing yards over expectations. So your bait, that's a metric, that's a rate that will land you in the bottom of the league.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards, Justice Hill have not really had anything to write home about in terms of rushing yards over expectation, but it is nowhere near as bad as minus 1.2. So we should say the Jets run blocking, one of the worst run blocking units in the NFL. I think ESPN's run block win rate for New York is like literally 31st of 32. So only one team would be worse than them. But still, I don't know if he's going to give this Ravens offense a whole lot of juice. The fact that you are going from whatever the Jets quarterback situation is to Lamar Jackson, who is every running back's best friend, is definitely going to be something that is helpful to him. As John Harbaugh said, he wanted to be here in Baltimore. And I think that's because every running back wants to be here in Baltimore, playing behind this offensive line, playing with Lamar Jackson. I just don't know if we're going to look back, if the Ravens go to the Super Bowl, if they win a couple games in the playoffs and say Dalvin Cook was anywhere close to the difference maker in those
Yeah,
games.
he really shouldn't matter. And counting stats wise, 3.2 yards per carry this season. I mean, I mentioned no touchdowns on the year, just 78 receiving yards. You could make the case. You talk about they given a lot of opportunities. He was certainly given a lot fewer opportunities in New York than he was Minnesota.
Right.
Only top double digit carries one time this season, and I think that was the first game of the season against the Buffalo Bills. But he is a practice squad addition, so low risk. But
Does not count against the salary cap, according to Brian McFarland, who does great work for Russell Stewart Board and kind of figuring those things out.
and so he would take an elevation, right, on game day during a playoff game in order to even be active for a game. Would you ever see him involved? I mean, barring an injury to Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, I mean, has he earned more opportunities than I was thinking today? This might be a bigger stakes game for Melvin Gordon only because now the pressure is on
Yeah,
him. And I know this is all low stakes because we're literally talking about the third running back, but this might eventually impact a playoff game down the line. You know, and Melvin Gordon had his opportunity today and he did not make the most of it. So maybe there is an opening, a window now for Dalvin Cook to be a game day elevation and maybe get some totes on and during a playoff game.
yeah. I think the big question for him in this offense would be: are you comfortable at the mesh point?
Mhm.
Are you comfortable in these with these read options? And unfortunately for us, we're not really going to get eyes on that because all the work that they're going to do is behind closed doors, in practice. When you think about that comfort level that he might have, I don't know if it's going to I don't know how much better it would be for him compared to someone like Melvin Gordon because, you know, with the kind of rushing offenses that he was in Minnesota, it was pro style. It was not college style. When you are with Kirk Cousins, you are not getting a lot of read options. He is not a threat to run the ball. Lamar is. So, maybe he's a natural at it. Maybe it's something that the Ravens, even if he's not super comfortable with it, maybe you just say, we're going to take our chances with the 1 to 3 or 4 carries that he might get in a game. You're not sweating bullets over it, but we saw today. If it's rainy conditions, Lamar has a tendency of kind of extending that mesh point where you're not really sure about how secure that exchange is
Yeah.
sometimes. So, fumbles have been this team's undoing. They were this team's undoing early on. They were kind of sort of this team's undoing today. Obviously, Pittsburgh, really didn't fare any better. But for something as important and consequential as ball security and mesh point exchanges, I think Dalvin Cook is really going to have to prove to the Ravens coaches and decision makers that I can be your guy in a high leverage spot like that.
Yeah. One more move we should discuss: the extension that Michael Pierce received that reportedly broke today. 2 year, $7.5 million. So that extends him through the 2025 season. He was going to be an impending free agent. Coming into today, he had started all 16 games. He played over 600 snaps. Both of those were career highs, just 1 sack, but 30 quarterback pressures, fifth most on Baltimore, according to PFF. Prior to the 2023 season, there were serious injury concerns about him just because he'd played only 8 games in Minnesota in 2021, only 3 games with the Ravens in 2022. Seems to have put that behind him, at least for now. I think this is probably not the defensive tackle that Ravens fans were hoping they would be extending at this point in the season. But considering Justin Madubuike is still scheduled to be an impending free agent after the season, you want to have as much depth there as possible, even if you bring back Justin Madubuike. And Michael Pierce has been very solid for this team.
Yeah. And to the injury question, I think people get hung up on the fact that someone is missing games and not really looking at what someone is missing games for. In Minnesota, it was an elbow injury, and then I think it was something else that was not really soft tissue related. Last year, the torn biceps, freak injury, that happens in like the weirdest possible games for the weirdest possible reasons. So for a guy of that size, the fact that it is not a knee injury, not a hip injury, not something that you could consider degenerative, I think that was like why I was fine with a deal like this. He's going to be hopefully good to go for next year. Obviously, he is 31. Those guys tend not to at that size, you know, age all that well
Yeah.
into the life of that contract. But he has given this defense so much and in unexpected ways. I mean, for a time there, he had a higher pass rush win rate than Justin Madubuike. He is not the guy that you want to target in some of those pick stunts that the Ravens have used with Patrick Queen and with Justin Madubuike to such great effect. But when the Ravens play defense that the way that they want to do, which is with those two high safeties, light boxes, so you have the kind of security in the back end that we saw again even today. You're going to need a guy to kind of gum up the works like Michael Pierce. And even though there might be some questions asked about is he kind of blocking the way for Travis Jones to get on the field more, I don't really think he does because you know he's so versatile. Travis Jones is so versatile. We saw him get a sack lining up as a 5 tech, lining up over a tackle. Sure, does this money potentially come out of the Justin Madubuike fund? Probably, but we don't know what that math looks like for the Ravens. If they really want to keep Justin Madubuike, they'll just slap that franchise tag on him
Right.
and find a way to make it work. But Madubuike and Michael Pierce play different positions. One of those guys is going to be more on early downs. The other is going to be more important on later downs. And so, like I said, if the Ravens are committed to keeping Justin Madubuike in Baltimore for at least one more year, then Eric DeCosta and everyone who is in that Ravens front office is going to find a way to keep him in Baltimore for at least one more year.
Yeah, and we've seen them do that in the past, exercising that franchise tag when they absolutely need to keep a guy at least for an extra year. And an extra year would give you an idea to come up with maybe a better succession plan because they have these young defensive tackles and these defensive linemen, but maybe, you add an extra year of development for those guys and wait to see what you have in a year. That's a possibility as well. But that franchise tag is going to be expensive for Justin Madubuike. But
Yep.
all of those questions are down the line in the near term. This team has to get ready for a divisional round game against an unknown opponent in 2 weeks, but we do know what we played here at M&T Bank Stadium. Jonas, you have plenty of coverage on the BaltimoreBanner.com along with Gianna Hahn and Kyle Goon. We have everything covered in terms of getting you ready for wildcard weekend and then the divisional round. And here on the Banner Ravens podcast, you and I are going to have another episode later this week, Thursday, as we preview the matchups for wildcard weekend, look at some potential opponents for the Ravens. And then beyond that, we will react to whatever matchup the Ravens end up getting, and we'll have full preview there as well. So be sure to follow Jonas at Jonas_Shaffer on Twitter. I am at Paul Mancano, and of course at All Banner Sports, and subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months. Please like, review, rate, subscribe. Give us your thoughts on the Banner Ravens podcast. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We will be back this Thursday with a fresh episode. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks for tuning in.